I will do now is I will hand over to our next speaker. Are you ready, Gyle?
Sure.
Awesome. So our next speaker is Gyle. She grew up during a brutal dictatorship in a country riddled with all the natural calamities happening on a frequent basis. I'm going to read the whole one of this because this is amazing writing, by the way. She has survived wading through dirty floodwaters, drinking potentially radioactive coke, and the Y2K bug. And before moving to tech, she trained as a psychologist. Currently, she works as a cyber threat analyst where she works from home 100%. And she's going to talk to us today about a little bit of a variation on the CIA triad. So thank you very much, Gyle. Take it away.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So, okay, so one of the main reasons why I decided to submit this talk was that with the things happening around me, it was like very overwhelming. And I decided to draw upon my background in order to understand why people are doing this, what's like happening everywhere. And I wanted to also share like, what I've thought about the past few weeks, months, and with everything that's happening here. That's why I call it the CIA Triad, staying sane in crazy times. Okay, so first of all, clarification. This is not a talk about threat intel. I'm not going to talk about the CIA there, that three-letter agency. And I'm not going to be talking about cyber crime gangs, like the Triad and all those things. So just clarification, despite the title, it's not about threat intel or cybercrime. Okay. So instead, okay, it's about reconceptualizing or reframing what we think about, like when we think of CIA in our community or in the infosec or cybersecurity industry. So everybody knows like what the CIA is. You have confidentiality, integrity, availability. I'm not going to define all those things, but if you're reviewing for your CISSP exam, you can understand this. Okay, so what I'm trying to do now is like reframe this triad into understanding what is happening or what has happened. So I basically summarize it into these 3 points. Like first, community and culture, then individual background and affect. So I'm going to be going through all of these individual points here. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but ever since like the end of 2019 up to like 2020, I feel like every morning I wake up, it's like damage report, like what's happening. And I have this habit of like the first thing I reach for when I wake up is actually my phone. I look at it, I scroll through the news and try to understand like, what's happening. And especially in my case, because I have family all over the world. So I have family in different parts of the world and I want to know what's like happening there. Yeah, so it's really like this. So I just felt like, yeah, every morning, this is me, okay? Now, one of the first things that I try to understand when I encounter like any person, I always look at like, where they're coming from, their community, even their, cultural background. So I was just like amazed. It was like, God, it felt like a year ago, but it was just the first week of March when I first heard about TP shortage. And you're like, oh my gosh, what's like happening? Why are people talking about why are people hoarding toilet paper? Why is it like people fighting over toilet paper? So I look at it from a perspective of in terms of cultural background. So in terms of cultural background, we have different ways of dealing with personal hygiene. Okay, so one of the things that I put here, if you could just Google tabo lota aside from bidet, so you have those other options there. So this is something that is like quite personal to us, and to see something that we take for granted but we need on a daily basis being gone from the shelves just makes sense that I need to get this and I need to get as much as I can. Now the other thing here is that we have to think about community, our community. Like there are people in our community who needs who may not have the ability to drive around and look for different for stores which has like toilet paper. So we have to like think about we need to make sure that we just take what we have instead of, taking a lot. Okay, and I'm really glad that immediately uh, the the big supermarkets here started, implementing limits. Okay, now, so when another thing about trying to understand is the individual background. So I have here a pop quiz. I don't know whether you could like see it right now. So pop quiz. So I come from a country who was famous for someone having or hoarding 3,000 pairs of shoes. Okay. I don't know whether anybody's like in the chat room who would be like, chatting or like popping up like, okay, so first want to say which particular country I came from. So if you could tell from my accent or this pop quiz wherein we talk about there's like 3,000 pairs of shoes. Okay. So I grew up during a time where, yes, thanks Casey, so I saw that. Okay. I grew up during a time wherein there was a lot of scarcity. There was this massive difference. Either you're very, very poor or you're part of the ruling oligarchy. Okay. And at that time, I really didn't know about excesses because, in a way, I was quite sheltered by my parents. I remember going to the supermarkets with them, but it's not a frequent thing. And then years later, I realized that my parents did not take us grocery shopping. We used to go, like monthly on a monthly basis, and my parents didn't take us to supermarkets when there's this, like shortages or things that are, because there's people who are like panic buying because there's massive, like hurricanes and typhoons. We call them typhoons, so it's on a frequent basis, and every time there's a big one coming in, people try to buy as much as they can. In fact, just like the word hoarding, that was the first English word that I actually learned, the concept of hoarding, wherein you keep on buying stuff so that you have something to prepare you. But my parents have always emphasized that we buy enough so that just in case we lose electricity, we have the canned food there. And that's why up to this time, I'm a big fan of spam because I grew up like eating spam when there is, hurricane. Okay, so basically, we have to look at the environment. So people who grew up in certain, situations wherein you have this kind of, scarcity, it's sort of like you have that kind of scars, like up to this point, I thought that it was normal that everybody will buy, a little bit something extra. Like if you're going to the supermarket, like on a fortnightly or on a weekly basis, you always get like an extra until you have your own, uh, items that's good for at least 2 weeks. And then I realized that it's not a usual thing. It's like it's just me. I was fortunate to move from Philippines to Singapore, and I had like roommates or flatmates saying that, oh, in times of like if there's like any issues or anything, I want to be your flatmate because you always have at least 2 weeks worth of food there. So I was thinking, perhaps from the perspective of other people, they don't really actually have this, kind of background. So that's why it's like, oh no, this is like the first time we're gonna experience this. So I gotta make sure that I have enough food to last me for quite some time. And also, there's second, access to resources. So if people have this scarcity mindset, there's always the idea that I have to make sure that I have enough. And this is something that I grew up with because my paternal grandmother grew up during World War II, and it was like really time of scarcity. And for her, being secure means having enough food in the pantry. So we have to look at this. So in my early childhood, experiences has led me to a situation, an interesting situation wherein I have enough like food for about 3 weeks Okay, and that's not because I hoarded, because like the past few shopping, like from last year, I would always get something extra. If let's just say there's a sale on like, you know, canned beans, I'm gonna buy, instead of 2, I buy 3, so a little at a time. So, and that has provided a buffer for me, especially during the time I was made redundant last year. So it was a source of comfort that I know that we have enough food in the pantry for 3 weeks. Okay, so it's that, like that individual background. Now, if you come from a background wherein there's always, you know, a lot of food, a lot of things there. Like for example, I remember the old song about I can't carry a tune. Like I come from the land down under. There's like a land of plenty. So there's that land of plenty. And for me to go to a supermarket with all the bare shelves there, sort of like, where's that land of plenty? So there, I have that, you know, cognitive dissonance wherein there's that song, there's that idea wherein there's like, this is a land of plenty, but you have bare shelves there. So that's quite confronting for me. Okay, and maybe for other people who are used to having, you know, this plenty, like having a plentiful, like all these options available, it is quite confronting. Okay. Now, I talk about, you know, the background. So if, for example, you grew up in an environment wherein there's always hurricane, floods, volcanic eruptions, and all those things. So you kind of have that, you know, disaster preparedness mindset. And now the reason why I put actually here this meme is because I'm actually quite short. If you haven't met me, in real life, I'm actually quite short. So in the Philippines, when there's flood, the flood waters is like up to my waist level. So I've really waded, you know, like across flooded, you know, roads. You know, like for example, the high school where I went to, every time there's like a massive, you know, rain, and there's always like the street is flooded, and I'm gonna be just wading there. So if you have this kind of background, you're sort of like kind of, you know, comfortable about certain issues. But if this is like the first time that you're encountering, you know, something different, then it does make sense that you'll think like, I have to make sure that I have enough, you know, to sustain me and my family. Okay. Now, another thing that is quite interesting was that one of the things that I read, there was this paper that was released by the Australian government about food insecurity, and also about this particular numbers, like 95% of Australian households maintain between 2 and 4 days of pantry stock. So I had to remember, I have to like keep on remembering the numbers, because it may be due to personal circumstances, economic circumstances, or it could even be because of, you know, access to resources. Maybe you're calling in from a rural area wherein you have to drive about 2 hours to get to the supermarket. So if you have like different situations, so definitely people who need to shop in bulk because of their, you know, their distance, so there are access to their resources, definitely they will be putting in, they will be having more pantry stock. But for us who live in the suburbs or in the city, wherein it's so easy, you go down, like walk about 5-10 minutes, you have the Woolies and Coles, it's so easy to just like buy something here. So you have that pantry stock of like just between 2 and 4 days. So now when we talk about self-isolation, wherein we need to, or like quarantine, we need to have like 14 days. If you come from overseas or from another state, you have to like self-isolate for 14 days. And definitely if you come home and you only have like 2 to 4 days of pantry stock, then it does make sense that you will be like buying a lot. Okay. Now, so I talk about looking at, you know, community, cultural background, talk about, you know, individual backgrounds. Now, I'm going to be talking about affect, because basically I was trained as a psychologist, and I looked at affect. Okay, let's just clarify what's the meaning of affect. Okay, this is basically the broad range of feelings that people can experience. This is different regarding like emotions. Some people think affect and emotions are the same, but emotions is like, it's like directed. It's like short, you know, short. So it's just, affect is the range of feelings. And in situations like this, anxiety levels do, you know, go up because there's a lot of uncertainties. So it makes sense that in order to make sure that you are able to, manage your anxiety levels, you turn to what is comforting for you. So you have to look at what, makes you feel, safe, in your environment. So now, in order to understand this, I'm gonna do like psychobabble. So I'm gonna be talking about Freud and Maslow. Okay, so so but this is just a quick, summary of Freud's psychodynamic approach. For Freud, there are several, think of it like developmental stages. So we first go through the oral phase, okay? And depending on how our needs were met during that phase, we either become oral passive or oral aggressive, okay? And then we also have the anal, part of development, and this coincides during the time that you do your toilet training. When when you're a toddler, your parents toilet trained you. If your parents were too harsh, you're too, retentive. So that means you have um, this need to make sure that everything's tidy, or you could be like obsessive, could be mean or stubborn. But if it's too lax, that means you're untidy. And then of course there's the other stages there. But I'm just gonna focus on the anal part because I was thinking this probably explains why people are hoarding toilet paper, because they've been trained that you have to make sure that you know how to clean after yourself. And the sign of being a big boy or a big girl now is that you are able to take care and clean after yourself. So maybe on some sort of like, the back of our minds, we need to make sure that we have to make sure that if we are on 14 days, I don't know how long, like, in terms of self-isolation, we have to make sure that we take care of cleaning after ourselves. Okay. Now, so these two train of thought in psychology are the ones that really resonated with me when I was studying psychology before, because you have like Freud and then you have Maslow, wherein Maslow is a little bit more liberal in terms of looking at, in order to progress, develop yourself, you need to make sure that the basic, or at the bottom of that pyramid or your hierarchy of needs, the basic needs are met, and then you move on. So if you look at it at the bottom part of my screen, or this pyramid or triangle, you see the red part there. It's physiological needs. So it's about like having food, water, shelter, clothing, having sleep, and included there is, you're taking care of your bodily functions. So toilet paper goes under that. Okay, so for me, it makes sense that people are hoarding it because of this. And of course, there's also this. After that, once you've met your physiological needs, your next, the next layer here is about safety and security. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of unemployment, and I personally have some survivor guilt. Like, I am so lucky. I feel so blessed and lucky that I have a job when millions of people have lost their jobs and their livelihood, and that will definitely impact their sense of security and safety. Okay, and then we have love and belonging. Okay, this is about friends and family, and it is like doing self-isolation is an act of great love. It's an act of great love because as we isolate, we know that what we're doing is being interdependent and making sure that everyone, okay, stays safe. Okay. And then you have like self-esteem, self-actualization, all those hierarchy of needs. Now, if the bottom layers or like bottom part of this hierarchy of needs are not met, it is quite difficult to move up and do, self-actualization. And part of self-actualization is like you have the morality, acceptance, all those ethical, things. Now, if the basic parts are not being met, then there's a big possibility that, people just regress to, it's just going to be I'm just going to think of myself, or I'm just going to think of my, my family. I don't care about other people. Okay, so we have to understand it from this, perspective. Now, how do we move forward from this? So once again, I use the CIA acronym. Okay? First is C, compassion and community. Okay, we need to be compassionate. We have to remember that we need other people. it's normal to think that, oh, okay, I have to make sure that, my family, okay, they're all okay. But once you move to that point wherein you have secured, what you need, make sure that you reach out to your community. And I'm really lucky in a sense that we have this virtual cybercons, or we have all the technology available here to connect with everybody. We may not be there, in a physical sense, but we have this community, an online community wherein we can reach out to our colleagues or our friends or people we've met, in conferences. I mean, I made a lot of friends because of the conferences I've been to. Okay, so let's have, and then the compassion. So I've seen memes wherein people are like quite mean to supermarket workers and all those things. And for me, I don't understand that, because these are the people who are helping us. We need to we need to be compassionate, because they're going out there. They may not be your, highly degreed, medical doctors, but they are there. Okay. And then there's then the second part of the CIA Triad, what I'm trying to refrain is integration. So when I talk about integration, it's a matter of, we in the community tend to, be like kind of socially awkward at times, and there are things that we're like nerds and geeks, and we have like our own, um our niche, our own, community, but we need to integrate with the other, the bigger community. Like we have seen like a rise in terms of spear phishing attempts, like small businesses being targeted. Okay, please consider, volunteering some of your time in terms of helping this different businesses and even our community members. And it could be as simple as helping someone check their email, whether this is legitimate, or you can go to LinkedIn and volunteer with the COVID-19 group, wherein we have our own Australian group, wherein this is to help the different small businesses or the healthcare sector. So that's one way how we can integrate. Okay. And then lastly, it's about availability. Okay. When I say availability, I'm talking about being available to people who need your help. Okay, of course, we need to do, to set boundaries in terms of like time, because I understand that for some who are still working right now, the volume of work is massive. And then that leaves very little of your personal time to help other people. But if you know of other resources or another person who may be able to help that other person, ask that person, hey dear, are you available to help this? Because I'm currently like quite loaded, but I could help this, So now let's look at CIA, not just in terms of the security triad, but in terms of, being compassionate, being there for the community, integrating our, ourselves, our skill set, helping, our community. So that's my call to action for everyone. That's it. And anyway, any questions? I think yeah, I haven't like, I haven't gone over time.
Look, Gyle, that was fantastic. I know there's a lot of conversation on the Slack right now about the relevance of this talk to the situation we're all in right now, and how, hang on, sorry, I'll just turn this one down, and how important it is for us all to work together to get through this situation. It's really good to see. I know there's been some work between in the UK. When I was in the UK a couple of weeks ago, there was a group set up that basically said, we're incident responders, we're here to help, like come messages if you're a healthcare provider and you need some help. And I think there's some work in the Australian market to do that as well. So it's been really good to sort of see, for me, for this talk, it was really nice to see sort of the reason why we do things. And that's sort of driving a lot of what the behaviors of people have right now, and why there's, people don't understand the behaviors sometimes, because we all have different ways of growing up and different experiences. So thank you very much for the talk.
And before I go, I just want to give you the Wakandan salute. which is based on the ASL for a hug. So I give everybody a cyber hug.
Thank you very
Once
much.
this is over and I see you in the different cyber cons, look for my beanie and I'll give you a real tight, hug.
Yes,
So
for those who don't know, the rainbow beanie is traditional at all cyber conferences that Gyle goes to. So she's very lovely and she always wants to say hello and meet new people. So thank you again, Gyle.
No, thank you everyone, and be well and stay healthy. Take care, everyone. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you.